Hello and welcome to our learning modules for the 2iCCAP project, developed by the University of Applied Sciences in Western Switzerland. Our program consists of two parts. The first part covers questions about the Living Lab approach, setting it up, and the roles within a Living Lab. The aim here is to help you to set up your Living Labs or to develop existing ones. Part 1 also introduces governance and business models to successfully establish and manage thriving living labs. The second part presents each step of the Living Lab integrated process. It aims to provide you with tools and examples at the meso level, project level, and at the micro level, tool level. In the first module of this capacity building program, we will discover some of the general principles that surround the Living Lab approach and management of the stakeholder ecosystem. So, let's start by taking a closer look at what a Living Lab is. Main characteristics of this concept is benefits and challenges. Following this, we will learn key methods and tools that serve a Living Lab, as well as how to engage different groups of stakeholders for current and future projects. So let's begin with this core question. What is a Living Lab? There are different definitions of this concept, and with the current trend to develop Living Labs in Europe, this concept is in constant evolution and development. In her thesis, Joëlle Mastelique proposed the following definition for a Living Lab: an innovation intermediary that orchestrates an ecosystem of actors in a specific region. At least 4 important predecessors of the Living Labs movement as we know it today can be discerned: the cooperative design movement in Scandinavia, European social experiments with IT, development of digital city initiatives, and the creation of HomeLab by MIT. The proper Living Lab concept came into use towards the end of the 1990s and spread worldwide. In Europe, they were mostly in line with the research context and co-creation. In the next 8 slides, you will discover these movements in more detail. Now that we have learnt from our predecessors, here are the key elements of our current understanding of what a Living Lab is. These elements are active user involvement, a real-life setting, multi-stakeholder participation, a multi-method approach, and co-creation. Recently, the orchestration and collaboration with all different actors was also added. In our context, we'd like you to focus upon the key principles of activities within a Living Lab: the value of creation, the influence on the process, sustainable development, an open approach, and realism in action and projects. So how can we benefit from the Living Lab approach? Co-creating solutions with the users and not for the users helps to create the feeling of attachment and stronger engagement. The Living Lab acts at all levels of a project, therefore we can get the big picture of a process and can create a holistic vision. Identifying different stakeholders' values helps us to aspire to the most convenient solutions and to avoid misjudgment of user needs early on. A Living Lab also has different tools to animate workshops, to analyze context, and using participant facilitating activities to encourage collaboration. However, Living Labs do face challenges, and here are some key ones to consider. Considering the first point, it might be the lack of comparative studies or the absence of a standardized Living Lab model. The balance between research and development is not always obvious. The next group of challenges are related to issues that arise from multi-business collaboration or openness between the stakeholders. Not all stakeholders will be flexible to adapt to fast-changing requirements in addition to their routine workloads. Financial issues can also be the source of complications. Another issue is that the actors' motivations, needs and expectations are not always satisfied. Here we can also mention the issue of how to motivate multiple stakeholders with different needs and interests. Ethical challenges are also important to keep in mind. Respect privacy and the use of participants' data. Be aware of overlooking users' interests in Living Lab activities or issues of intellectual property in Living Lab projects. There are multiple types of Living Labs. For example, a Living Lab set up for urban development in general might more specifically involve mobility labs. We also have specific Living Labs for the energy and environmental issues. Others may focus upon cultural activities, tourism, health or social issues, etc. In Living Lab methodology, we set apart the notions of co-creation and co-design. Co-creation is a term that refers to the whole process of the Living Lab approach. Co-design is a specific element within the co-creation. It refers to the collaboration between the specialists and users working to find a solution. One of the most important Living Lab concepts is the so-called three-layer model. Living Labs act at different levels, and this is our conceptual representation of it. The macro level is where we will talk about stakeholder and context analysis. The meso level will consider the different projects that could be managed by the Living Lab. And the micro level refers to the specific tools and methods available to support and to help fulfill activities and projects taken on by the Living Lab. So it is important to mention that there is no hierarchy between these three layers, and for example, the use of tools within your micro level during the project's development will support stakeholders and projects management. Let's see how we can apply the three-layer model to the 2ICCAP project. At the macro level, it's important to consider stakeholder management and context analysis, as well as to develop a governance model for your Living Labs. At the meso level, we will establish sustainable energy and climate plans and fund the Living Lab itself. Once your Living Lab created, you could think about additional projects, resulting in a portfolio with a collection of all projects managed by your Living Lab. You've already experienced the PESTLE and SWOT analysis, good examples of tools found within the micro level. To this, we would add collaborative workshops, climathons, interviews and surveys, and all these can be organised to set up your climate plan. We're looking forward to sharing more tools in the modules that follow. If you want to read more about the concept of a Living Lab, its history and characteristics, here are some useful sources on the topic. Some of these references can also be found in the annex of additional documents for this course. Have a look in your own time, but now let's continue and go to the second part of this module. This next part introduces you to the stakeholders ecosystem and suggests how to bring stakeholders together with the assistance of Living Lab activities. Let's just go back to the definition of a Living Lab and emphasize its role as an innovation intermediary that orchestrates an ecosystem of actors or stakeholders in a specific region. For the 2ICCAP project, we could think of a region at the city level and consider which stakeholders would be concerned with the development and implementation of an integrated energy and climate plan. The main challenge here is that there are a lot of different groups of stakeholders, each with their specific interests. How are we going to create a common vision and harmony between them? This is the goal of the Living Lab. In Living Lab methodology, we consider the perspectives of each stakeholder area. There are 4 different stakeholder areas, and for this reason, we call it the quadruple helix model, consisting of the public sector concerning authorities, and this will include all institutions at local, regional, and national levels, together with the government. This is in partnership with the research and academic sector that includes, for example, universities. We also include the private sector, companies and businesses of all sizes, and of course the individuals, people. For the 2ICCAP project, we could think to integrate public stakeholders such as city administration, for example, the Building and Urban Planning Department, or Energy and Environment Department. Energy agencies, energy and technology providers, as well as local associations could feature within the private sector. In the field of research, we will not only require collaboration with tertiary education and research labs that work to develop energy and urban planning, it would also be highly beneficial to integrate social scientists working with the users. According to the context of your city, your people or end users will vary. However, these could include ambassadors that support energy and climate action or representatives of housing associations. You may be interested to know that the concept of a quadruple helix model does not stand alone. Initially, the so-called triple helix model was proposed, although user engagement was not so intense. Following developments, the quadruple model, which we use in the Living Lab today, was submitted. Since then, the most recent concept, the quintuple helix, was promoted and includes ecological and environmental aspects, especially relevant to our 2ICCAP project. We thought it important to mention all 3 models within the programme, and although we will also be considering environmental aspects, all the tools that we suggest to use for Living Lab activities will relate to the principles of a quadruple helix model. This relates back to the importance of including a variety of different stakeholders. If we are to create projects that have an impact, particularly in the sphere of climate and energy planning, we need to work to transform their multiple voices into a common melody. Here are some examples of stakeholders within the public administration sector. City council members, the mayor, or the representatives of specific departments. The research group could be represented by researchers, university professors, students, as well as school teachers. We can imagine technological providers, urban planners, network operators, or different housing companies to feature in the private sector. And lastly, individuals such as housing association managers, property owners or tenants are all good examples of those that could be associated to the people group. Using the quadruple helix model, we can develop a visual map that situates stakeholders according to their role or level of importance in the project. In this 3-circle map, the circles drawn upon the quadruple helix model represent the levels of integration and importance of each stakeholder involved in the process. The core stakeholders or key partners are placed in the central core area of the circle. Local organisations involved in the project are placed in the second circle. And the third will feature future possible collaborations on a broader scale. The next tool in our Empathise toolbox is the Stakeholders Ecosystem Map. This visual representation of the stakeholders' ecosystem within which a project operates can provide us with different perspectives. It may help to reveal existing formal and informal relationships between stakeholders, or how to find new business opportunities. It may even identify friction residing between existing relations, or possibly identify how new ties may be fostered. We also suggest that you use the interest-influence matrix. The aim of this model is to help us identify the right people for the right purpose and to recognize and take relevant action so that you have interested and influential actors in place who support your project. By positioning different stakeholders upon the matrix according to their decision-making power or influence and their motivation or interest, you can recognize the strategy that you need to put in place to better engage them. For example, users of a solution, or the end users, might be placed high on interest, however have low influence, if not included in the design process from the beginning. So you could choose to keep them informed on the project updates, or, according to the Living Lab approach, think about how to empower them to encourage active engagement. By both empowering and engaging users in the innovation process, we uncover their potential. This is best done by encouraging interest and integrating them during the earliest stages of the project. Having used the interest-influence matrix, you will more easily be able to clarify how your stakeholders can be best active in the project. This table presents the different types of actors to consider in a Living Lab. The utilizers are those who will use the Living Lab methods to create innovative solutions. These might hire a Living Lab team to develop a project. Enablers are the resource providers, such as cities. Providers could be private companies. Users are the citizens who will be affected by the project work. And lastly, researchers, mostly representatives of the universities, who generate the structure, knowledge of the Living Lab. Of course, these actors will vary according to each project. On this slide, you can find different types of Living Labs according to the type of actors presented earlier. For your future Living Lab, you should think according to your specific context, the capacity of your team, and the most active stakeholders who could potentially manage Living Lab activities in the future. Let's now relate where we are to sustainability, also a complex concept, defined as an equilibrium among the ecological, social, and economic dimensions of human life. In the context of a Living Lab activity, sustainability refers to its viability and responsibility to the community within which it operates. It is able to be concerned with environmental, economic, and social effects, especially with the help of a broad stakeholder community and active engagement. So let's talk about user engagement, at what stage users can participate, and why it's beneficial for all organizations involved. Users could be engaged within Living Labs to contribute to designing and developing innovations, and also with testing new ways of addressing sustainability challenges. In this sense, a living lab could be broadly defined as a situation or circumstance where real-world sustainability challenges are formally addressed in stakeholder partnerships. Furthermore, it has been observed that engaging users in the innovation process improves company performance across various industries. They contribute to speeding up development processes and to lowering costs. Users' knowledge, too, offers a valuable resource for innovation because it fosters understanding of real-life situations where products and services are involved. So how exactly can different actors contribute to Living Lab projects? City representatives could help to create the vision, to allocate resources, or to provide a strategic leadership, and in any case to promote projects. The private sector could be helpful in providing the expertise, as well as in developing prototypes and testing the future products. The academic sector is capable of providing us with the methodology, expertise in anthropological research, for example, running the surveys, interviews, or context analysis. Inhabitants could provide place-based relevant user experience. They participate in the testing of solutions, as well as becoming ambassadors to promote and to replicate Living Lab solutions. As before, here are some references on the topics raised during the second part of this module. We hope that they will provide more detail and answer your questions. So, in a nutshell, the concept of the Living Lab has multiple definitions. Throughout our modules, we will consider a Living Lab as an innovation intermediary that orchestrates an ecosystem of actors in a specific region. This Living Lab concept resulted from several recent movements: cooperative design, social experiments, and digital city initiatives. The goal of a Living Lab is to co-design solutions using a 3-layer and a public-private people partnership or quadruple helix model. The key elements of the Living Lab approach are active user involvement in the early stages of projects, co-design of solutions with users, multi-stakeholder and multi-method approaches, as well as real-life settings. Lastly, a Living Lab uses tools from different disciplines to orchestrate an ecosystem of actors.
The content of this module is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 4.3 license. For more information about this license, you can follow the link in the slide. However, the property rights on the external resources referred to in this module might differ from the Creative Commons license. Therefore, that may need to be checked before remixing, adaptation, or other kinds of reuse.
We've come to the end of the first module of this capacity building program. Please let us know if you have any questions, and we are always happy to hear your feedback. Thank you very much for your attention. In the next module, we will talk about governance models. See you then.